Okay, let's be honest. Who here hasn't just kind of, mindlessly hit that like button on Facebook? Like, we've all been there, right? It's practically a reflex at this point. But what if I told you that seemingly harmless click could actually be sending your data into a legal maze? Basically, that's what we're diving into today,
Yeah.
with this Fashion ID case. And trust me, this one's a real doozy.
Yeah, it all starts with, well, a simple like button, right? On the Fashion ID website, they're a clothing retailer based in Germany. Seems pretty harmless, right? I mean,
Totally. I mean, you see those buttons everywhere online.
yeah.
Never really gave it a second thought, to be honest.
Well, and that's exactly where things get, well, kind of interesting, I guess you could say. So the thing is, the court found that just by having that button embedded, even if you never actually clicked it, it was already sending your data. We're talking your IP address, browser info, all that straight to Facebook.
Hold on, wait. So just by me visiting their website, my data is like already on its way to Facebook. That's kind of creepy.
It really is. It's almost like, when you have that friend who shows up to a party and they bring like an uninvited guest and you didn't invite this guest in like directly, but now they're there and you're kind of responsible for, well, for what they do.
Okay, yeah, okay, I get the analogy. Makes sense. But hold on, this was in Germany, right? So
Right.
do these European legal things actually affect us here?
Well, here's the kicker with this whole thing. This wasn't just like some small claims court thing. This actually went all the way to the Court of Justice of the European Union, the CJEU, their highest court. And their decision, man, it sent shockwaves through the entire data privacy world. And yeah, that includes over here too.
Wow, okay, so this is big. So what exactly did the court actually say? Like, give it to me straight, but in plain English, please.
Okay, so basically the court said that even though Fashion ID, they didn't actually hold the data themselves, they were still kind of like that party host, the one who's responsible for what their guest, in this case Facebook, is doing. So they called this whole thing joint controllership.
Joint controllership, so like both of them, Facebook and the website, are responsible for protecting my data.
Oh, exactly. And that, my friend, is where things get really, really interesting.
This whole joint controllership thing, man, it really is a game changer. So what does this actually mean for all those websites out there using, these social media buttons?
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, suddenly it's not just Facebook's responsibility to, protect user data. It's also on the website, the one using their tools. Like, imagine the court was saying, hey, you invited Facebook to the party, so you better make sure they're not spiking the punch.
Okay, that's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah.
So what happened? Did websites just ditch these buttons altogether?
Well, not exactly, no. It's more like it started this whole big debate about, the legal grounds for actually using these buttons. Because up until then, it was kind of this gray area, right?
Yeah.
But the CJEU, they drew a line in the sand. They said, hey, if you're relying on consent to justify this data collection thing, it's got to be legit.
Okay, legit consent.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? Especially in the wild west of the internet.
Well, think about it this way, right? Think about those cookie consent pop-ups, the ones that everyone loves to hate.
Oh, yeah, those things drive me crazy.
Right. Well, the Fashion ID ruling, it actually had this ripple effect, right? And those pop-ups, they got caught in the wave, too.
Wait, you're saying those things are more than just an annoying formality?
Exactly. The CJEU, they basically said, those pre-checked boxes, the ones we all just kind of blindly click through, yeah, those might not cut it anymore. Because real true consent, it means being informed, right? Being specific about what you're actually agreeing to. And it has to be freely given. No sneaky tactics allowed.
So no more accept all cookies.
Yeah.
Just to make the darn pop-up go away.
Yeah.
Man, that's going to take some getting used to.
It will. But it's about time, honestly, because this case, it shone a light on how companies were, kind of exploiting this gray area. And it makes us question, or at least it should make us question, every like button, every cookie banner, every time we encounter one online.
It really makes you realize how much data you're probably just handing over without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
This is starting to feel like an episode of Black Mirror, I got to be honest.
It's true. It can feel that way. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom, all right? Because this case, it really did push this whole issue of legitimate interest versus explicit consent to the forefront.
Okay, yeah, break that down for me. What's the difference?
All right, so legitimate interest, it's this idea that websites, they have a reason to collect some data even without explicit consent. Things like, for instance, preventing fraud or, stuff like that. But what the Fashion ID ruling kind of suggested was, well, this argument, this legitimate interest thing, yeah, it might not really fly when it comes to these social media plugins.
Interesting. So does that mean that websites like need this explicit consent for everything now?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because the CJU, they didn't explicitly say legitimate interest could never apply, but they definitely hinted that it would be a tough sell for sure.
Yeah. What a legal cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us? What are the lasting consequences of this whole Fashion ID saga?
Well, it's important to remember that this case, it mostly dealt with the EU's data protection rules from before GDPR, their current way stricter rules.
Right, the GDPR. So is this Fashion ID case, is it like old news now?
Not quite, no.
Yeah.
You see, even though it focused on the old rules, the court made it pretty clear that those principles, yeah, they probably apply to the GDPR as well.
Oh, really? So even though GDPR wasn't around during the Fashion ID case, its principles still apply?
Exactly. And GDPR has some serious teeth, let me tell you. We're talking
Yeah.
massive fines for companies that don't comply. So this case, it really set a powerful precedent.
Wow. There's like a warning shot across the bow for any website operating in Europe or dealing with, European users' data.
Exactly. And there's always a but, isn't there? But even with GDPR, there are still some gray areas.
Oh, come on. Not more gray areas. I thought GDPR was supposed to, clear all that up.
It did a lot. It did a lot. But, well, you know how it is. The online world, it moves fast. Remember those split-second data transfers we talked about?
Yeah.
How in the world do you get true, real consent, in real time when things are happening that fast?
Yeah. It's not like I can, give my explicit consent to every single data transfer that happens when I'm, browsing online. That's impossible.
It is. It is impossible. And that's where things get really tricky, because even with rulings like this one, finding that right balance, between user privacy and the data-driven nature of the internet. Yeah, it's still a work in progress. It really is.
Sounds like walking a tightrope, honestly.
You can say that again. But it's a tightrope we have to walk. And cases like Fashion ID, as complicated as they might seem, they help us, They help us understand the steps and the stakes involved.
It really does sound like, I don't know, this whole Fashion ID thing, it threw a wrench in the gears of, of the internet.
Yeah, you could say that. But, wrenches aren't always a bad thing, especially when they force us to actually take a closer look at what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So, for our listeners out there, the ones who, might be feeling a little, I don't know, vulnerable, right? Especially after all this.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway here? What can they actually do to better protect their data, especially online?
Well, like they say, right, knowledge is power. So the more you actually understand about your data rights, the better equipped you're going to be to kind of navigate this whole digital world, this whole landscape. And, this Fashion ID case, it's a perfect example of that, I think, because it might seem kind of like a niche legal battle right now, but it really does have some real implications for all of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know I'm gonna be looking at those buttons and those cookie banners a little differently now, for sure.
And that's a great first step, honestly. It really is. Just start paying attention to that stuff. Read the fine print, even if it's the most boring thing in the world. And honestly, if something just doesn't feel right, don't be afraid to just, to say no. You really do have the right to decline cookies, to opt out of, that data tracking stuff, and to just demand more transparency from the websites you use.
Well said. Well said. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the Fashion ID ruling. It's definitely a complex issue, but hopefully, you've gained some valuable insights today, some things that'll help you navigate the online world, with a little more awareness and hopefully a lot more power.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, this isn't the end of the conversation, Keep asking those tough questions and keep fighting for that right to privacy in this digital age. It's important.
Yes, it is. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.